Hello, hello. Welcome to the Enquiry podcast. This is a show that helps you to influence your reality to the greatest capacity in order to be able to use your life as the medicine that it is, to be able to know how to read the signposts and follow the breadcrumbs in order to express the fullness of who you are and what you're actually here for. I'm your host, Nerida Mills. I am a master psychosomatic practitioner, coach and facilitator, and it is my absolute pleasure to have you here. Welcome on board and let's get started.
Hello and welcome back to Enquiry. Today, I really want to explore with you a little bit more around the masculine feminine energy. This topic is really, really close to my heart. And the reason for that is because in my life experience, I have had the experience of being in a relationship where there was a lot of love, but we just didn't seem to be able to make it work. So it was really challenging in a lot of ways. And maybe you can relate to this when, you love somebody so much, but for whatever reason, it just is not hitting the mark. And sometimes that can actually be quite painful and it can turn quite toxic very easily as both parties scramble to try and get their needs met and try and reconcile the resentment that they feel, the frustration that's evident, and the deep uncertainty as to why it's not working. We all grow up with this projection that love is enough, love cures all, love overcomes all, love is the thing. But the reality is it's not. Love is not enough. And what actually defines a really resourceful relationship is one where both parties are really willing, open, and available for the work that it takes to be able to navigate the activations, the triggers, the frustrations, the hurts, the past trauma, all of the things that come along with that. So masculine and feminine energy work is something that I really dove into after the breakdown of that relationship. Now, there's been many, many times where I have questioned very deeply whether or not that relationship would have been able to be successful if I had known what I now know and if I had implemented what I now use. However, saying that, there's these kind of questionings is quite common, I think, for the human psyche. But of course, you don't know what you don't know. You can't implement what you don't have access to. So we also need to be really gentle with ourselves when we're looking in this space. And the reason that I'm saying that is because relationships is one of the places where we really do experience the most amount of pain. And so I just want to be mindful as we're moving into and leaning into this conversation that as you are, much like with the 4 R's, right? As you are learning about the way in which this sort of stuff plays out, I just want you to be gentle with yourself in it as well. Obviously, take the information and implement it into your relationship, implement it into your life. That's the whole point of these conversations. But try to be gentle with yourself around any behavior that has happened in the past or any actions that have happened in the past when you didn't know, or maybe relationships have broken down in the past because the tools and the resources just weren't in your awareness at that time. So masculine and feminine energy, the reason that this is so important in relationship is because our relationships really do reflect our masculine and feminine energy. So within each of us, and you'll hear a lot of people talk about this, within each of us, we have a masculine and a feminine energy. So the masculine is really associated from a physiological standpoint to the right side of the body or to the left brain. And the feminine is to the left of the body or to the right brain. And within each of these energies, you really do get that kind of stereotypical expression of man, woman, right? Now, the beautiful thing here is that you can also look at cultivating this relationship within yourself for a number of reasons. I'm going to recommend we start there. Number one is, as I said, the relationships outside of you reflect the relationship you have with yourself. So if you really want to significantly impact the relationship outside of yourself, come into partnership within yourself. Now, that's going to do a couple of things. A, it's going to bring you back to a centered, grounded space within yourself around your meeting your own needs for appreciation, for being heard, for being acknowledged, those sorts of things, and for being loved. The other thing is when you have a lived experience of the recognition and acknowledgement around what it is like to not have those things within yourself, it's really much easier to see how that might be playing out outside of yourself. Now, saying that, I also still do use the relationship outside of self in order to access the truth of the relationship that's happening within self, because the mind is going to want to hide that from you because it wants to keep you in the same, wants to keep you safe. So we use the external environment to as an access point to that subconscious expression that's actually playing out all of the time. So let's just unpack each of the energies and talk about how they relate. So the feminine energy really is the inner world. So it's, if you think about even in the standpoint of our sexual nature, like what is the role of the feminine role in creation of life, is to receive, right? So we receive a man in order to create life. Okay. We're always creating life. So you bring it back to that because it gives you a lot of hints around what is actually happening resourcefully or unresourcefully. A man's role in that is to penetrate life, right? To create. And so the masculine is really about the outer world, about how I move forward in the outer world and how I go about doing things like providing, like he provides the seed, right? And so often the feminine energy is very much more associated to my inner world, my creative nature, my sensuality, a lot more of the quiet, and it can be a lot more associated to you hear the dark feminine, right? The shadow element of self, although both have shadow elements. The feminine can also be associated to women in your life. So you'll see your feminine reflected in the women in your life as well. Now, as I said, the masculine is really more about penetrating, moving out, taking action, getting shit done, being goal orientated, providing. So it's often associated with like what we do in our outer world, and very much so around your purpose or your career, but also just generally in the actions that you take. So there's a very distinct difference in the energy of the masculine and feminine. If you feel into it for yourself, what you'll find is that the masculine energy is very linear. It feels very structured. It is, this is where we have routine systems, like I say, structure. So you can think of it like the masculine is the container. So it provides the boundaries for the feminine. The feminine is more like the flowing water. It's, a female's brain works much like a spaghetti bowl. The way in which we communicate is like masses of spaghetti pieces all in this bowl, and one piece links to another piece, which links to another piece, which links to another piece. And eventually we come back around to the point, whereas men talk very much in chapters. It's this point until that point. And then I take a breath and I think about it. And then it's this point to that point. It's very different. So the feminine is really more around like the water that lives in the container. It's flowing. It's emotive. It moves to the shape of the container. So they work in harmony with one another. And in order for us to express or experience a healthy masculine or a healthy feminine, you actually need to have both in a healthy state. It's really interesting. After I had been doing some really conscious work around my masculine and helping him to mature, what the feedback was from other people is, oh my God, you've got such a powerful feminine. And I find it really, really interesting because they are so intrinsically linked. You can't have a really powerful feminine without a really powerful masculine. You can't have a really powerful masculine without a really powerful feminine, because they need to be in partnership in order to be in their power. So this is one of the reasons why we want to work on both of them simultaneously and really start honoring how they support one another rather than what they take from one another. So the masculine and feminine conversation is something that really does move through each of the pillars in the integrated living model. It's so paramount in, personal mastery. It's so paramount in relationship mastery. And it really is the foundational piece of mastery of purpose. It is a very, very important conversation. And it's one that I want to continue to explore over the next couple of episodes. But for now, what I'm going to encourage us to do is really start looking for, what am I noticing so we're just bringing awareness through the unconscious, through our external environment. What am I noticing in the men and the women in my life? Is there a common thread that plays out? So, for example, for a long time, the men in my life I perceived to be unreliable. And what does that mean? It gives me a hint that actually my inner masculine is unreliable. And when I was able to reflect that in, where am I being unreliable? What I was noticing was it was in those masculine endeavors. So at the time, I was being really unreliable in my own business. I wasn't being committed or consistent in that. I would kind of plan for something, not really be able to follow through with it. There was a lot of reasons as to why that was taking place, which was partly because my feminine was so chaotic because there was no actual structure from my masculine, right? But it was the access point to look into where is that playing out for me, because that's where I have influence. So if I'm looking at all of the men in my life and going, you're all unreliable, I can do there's a number of different ways of responding to that. But my experience of it was that my initial response to it was all men are just unreliable, right? Put it in the bracket of all men are assholes. And so I become the victim to the dynamic with me and men. There's nothing I can do about that. I've got no power in that. I've got no point of influence in that. I'm just a victim to the fact in my mind that all men are a certain way. And so what is that going to do? It's going to mean that I'm going to attract more of that, which is just going to confirm my belief set around it. It's also going to mean that I am not appreciating the masculine either outside of myself or inside of myself. So I'm less inclined to then feel appreciated as a human being. I'm less inclined to actually then go about creating the structures and the container in my own life in order for my feminine to feel safe. And so now I don't just feel unsafe in relationship with other people, I feel unsafe in myself. And so therefore I feel unsafe in life. And that cascades to a whole number of different expressions. You've got a whole heap of different control mechanisms that are going to come up at that point. And then depending on a person's preferences to what they use to try and control their environment, that's going to play out, right? Because if I don't feel safe, what am I going to do? I'm going to try and gain control of anything that I can in order to feel safe again. Now, unfortunately, if we're not in resourceful states within ourselves, chances are that behavior is not going to be a resourceful one. So we're not actually going to get the outcome of feeling safe. We're probably just going to create more of the same, which is a sense of unsafety. So this is a really, really important conversation. And clearly it's one I'm very passionate about. And I'm really looking forward to unpacking it further. But for right now, I do encourage you to just start noticing what are the themes that you're noticing in your environment with the men and the women in your life, and just reflect it back into self. So where is that showing up in myself? Where am I doing the thing that I see in all of these other people? And we can take that and kind of play with it a little bit more in the coming episodes. Right. I hope you're all having a beautiful day, and I'll speak to you soon.
So that's it from us. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I would like to really acknowledge you for spending the time to explore what creates your reality and how you can influence it best. If you have absolutely loved this episode and the ones before it, then I highly encourage that you jump onto my newsletter list. You'll be able to find the details of that in the show notes. You can also follow me on Facebook or Instagram at Nerida Mills. Really, really, really looking forward to speaking with you again soon. If you have any comments, insights, feedback, anything that you would like to share from these episodes, please feel free to email me at info@neridamills.com. Until next time.